July 24, 1943, 9:57 p.m. Hamburg, Germany. The air is warm and still. Then the sirens begin. A deep, rising howl that cuts through streets and factories. Above the city, the sky starts to move. At first, it is only a distant hum, a low vibration. Then it grows louder, stronger. Thousands of engines beat together. The sound fills the night. It presses on the chest. German night fighters scramble from their airfields. Pilots run to their aircraft. Engines cough and roar. Searchlights stab upward. White beams crisscross the clouds. Then the sky turns black. Bomber after bomber appears, wingtip to wingtip, stretching across the horizon. They do not break formation. They do not turn back. Flak guns open fire. Explosions bloom like dark flowers. Shrapnel rains down. The bombers keep coming. Bomb bay doors open. The night glows orange as the first fires start. Smoke rises fast. The air smells of fuel and burning wood. Inside the cockpits, German pilots grip their controls. Radar screens glow faintly. Voices crackle over radios. There are too many targets, too many blips. The bomber stream seems endless. One pilot mutters a single word. Unstoppable. This is not just another raid. This moment is only the surface of a much larger story. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. By 1942, the air war over Europe had reached a turning point. Britain had survived the Blitz. The United States had entered the war. Allied leaders believed they could break Germany by attacking its industry from the air. Factories, rail yards, oil plants, and cities became targets. The concept was simple: use heavy bombers to strike deep into enemy territory. Do it day and night. Force Germany to defend everywhere at once. The Royal Air Force focused on night bombing. The United States Army Air Forces planned daylight attacks. Together, they aimed to wear down German production and morale. The bombers were large and slow compared to fighters. British aircraft, like the Lancaster, carried up to 14,000 pounds of bombs. American B-17 Flying Fortresses cruised at around 25,000 feet. They flew at speeds near 180 miles per hour when loaded. Each B-17 carried up to 13.50 caliber machine guns. Crews trusted these weapons to protect them. German air defenses were strong. Radar stations lined the coast. Searchlights guarded major cities. Flak towers protected key targets. Fighter units trained for interception. Commanders believed they could break the bomber threat piece by piece, but Allied planners developed a new method. Instead of spreading bombers across wide areas, they formed tight streams. Hundreds, then thousands of aircraft flew along narrow routes. This overwhelmed German defenses. Radar operators could not track everything. Fighters ran out of fuel and ammunition. Flak crews fired blindly into crowded skies. The sky itself became the battlefield. Early Allied bombing efforts were not smooth or successful. Crews lacked experience. Navigation was poor. Bombing accuracy was low. In 1942, many bombs missed their targets by miles. Night crews often dropped their payloads based on dead reckoning and luck. Losses were heavy. During early daylight raids, American bomber groups suffered shocking casualties. On some missions, more than 10% of aircraft failed to return. German fighters attacked from head-on, where bomber guns were weakest. One pilot wrote in a report, "We were flying into a wall of fighters." British crews faced other problems. Night bombing reduced losses, but made targeting difficult. Fires sometimes marked the wrong areas. Crews returned unsure of what they had hit. Morale suffered. Training hours were limited. Many gunners had less than 20 hours of live fire practice before combat. German defenders mocked the bombers at first. Some pilots called them flying barns. Flak commanders believed concentrated fire could break formations. Early victories reinforced this belief. In August 1942, a small raid on Rouen lost nearly a quarter of its aircraft. There were technical issues too. Engines overheated. Oxygen systems failed at high altitude. Crews froze in unheated cabins, where temperatures dropped below -40 degrees. Frostbite and hypoxia were constant threats. Both sides were learning through blood and loss. The early air war showed how dangerous and uncertain the strategy truly was. Over time, Allied crews adapted. They learned discipline. Formation flying improved. Bombers flew closer together, overlapping fields of fire. The defensive firepower grew deadly. A single B-17 could put hundreds of rounds into the air each minute. Navigation improved with new tools. Radio navigation systems guided bombers through clouds and darkness. Pathfinders marked targets with flares. Bombing accuracy increased. Crews learned to trust instruments instead of sight alone. The bomber stream proved its value. By flying in dense waves, Allied aircraft reduced exposure time over targets. German radar became saturated. Controllers could not vector fighters efficiently. Pilots arrived late or found only the tail of the stream. The bombers had strengths that were not obvious at first. They could absorb damage. B-17s returned with holes in wings and fuselages. Some landed with only one engine running. Crews developed confidence in their machines and each other. Escort fighters changed everything. Long-range fighters, like the P-51 Mustang, could follow bombers deep into Germany. They flew faster than German interceptors and had the range to stay for the entire mission. German pilots now faced fighters before, during, and after bomber contact. The air war shifted. The bombers were no longer alone. The sky belonged to the side that could endure. The first true test of the blackened sky came during Operation Gomorrah in July 1943. Allied planners targeted Hamburg, a major port and industrial center. Over several nights, more than 3,000 bombers attacked the city. On the night of July 27th, British Lancasters flew in a dense stream. German night fighters struggled to penetrate it. One pilot reported, "Targets everywhere. No clear path. Fires merged into a firestorm. Winds reached hurricane strength." Over 40,000 civilians died. The city burned 4 days. German defenses were shaken. Fighter losses mounted. Flak crews fired until barrels glowed red. The sheer number of bombers made interception chaotic and deadly. In October 1943, the Americans launched deep raids on Schweinfurt and Regensburg. The targets were ball-bearing factories vital to German industry. Over 300 B-17s took part. Escort fighters could not cover the full distance. German fighters attacked relentlessly. They used rockets and cannon. Bombers fell in flames. One crewman shouted, "They are coming straight through us." By the end, 60 B-17s were lost. Hundreds of airmen were killed or captured. Despite the losses, damage was severe. Production slowed. Repairs took months. German leaders realized no factory was safe. By 1944, the balance shifted again. During Big Week in February, Allied forces sent over 3,800 bombers against aircraft factories. Escort fighters now flew the full route. German pilots faced continuous combat. On March 6, 1944, nearly 800 bombers attacked Berlin. The sky over Germany filled with contrails. German pilots described it as white lines across the heavens. Interceptors rose, but were met by Mustangs and Thunderbolts. Losses were heavy on both sides. Berlin was hit again and again. Pilots felt the pressure. One German ace said, "There were too many. We could not stop them." Fuel shortages worsened. Training hours dropped. New pilots entered combat with minimal experience. By D-Day, Allied bombers dominated the air. They struck rail lines, bridges, and troop concentrations. German movement slowed to a crawl. The bomber stream became a weapon of control, shaping the battlefield below. The industrial effort behind the bomber offensive was massive. The United States produced over 12,000 B-17s and nearly 18,000 B-24s. Britain built more than 7,000 Lancasters. Factories ran day and night. Each bomber required tons of aluminum, thousands of parts, and trained crews of 10 men. Training programs expanded. Pilots logged hundreds of hours before combat. Mechanics learned to service engines quickly under pressure. Sorties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Fuel consumption was enormous. One large raid could burn millions of gallons of aviation fuel. Losses were high. Over 26,000 American airmen died in Europe. British losses were similar. Germany could not keep pace. Aircraft production increased, but fuel shortages crippled training. By late 1944, many German fighters sat grounded. Skilled pilots were gone. Replacements lacked experience. The bomber offensive forced Germany to divert resources. Thousands of guns defended cities instead of the front. Fighter units stayed home to defend the Reich. This weakened German armies facing the Allies on the ground. The psychological impact was profound. German civilians lived with constant alarms. Sleep was rare. Cities glowed red at night. Diaries spoke of fear and exhaustion. For pilots, the bomber stream was terrifying. Some called it the Black Wall. Others said it was like flying into a storm of steel. One night fighter pilot wrote, "You feel small. The sky is full, and you are alone." Flak crews felt helpless. No matter how much they fired, more bombers arrived. The sound of engines became a symbol of doom. Allied crews felt fear too. They called missions milk runs when losses were light. They called others slaughter. Still, they flew again and again. Trust in formation and escort kept them going. Morale shifted as success became visible. Crews saw factories destroyed, rail yards burned. The belief grew that the war could be shortened. Late in the war, bombers evolved. Radar bombing improved accuracy in all weather. Electronic countermeasures jammed German radar. New bombs targeted oil production, crippling fuel supplies. Bombers flew lower or higher depending on threats. Tactics shifted from area bombing to precision strikes. Fighter escorts became more aggressive, hunting interceptors before they reached the bombers. German defenses adapted too. Jet fighters appeared, but too late and in too few numbers. Fuel shortages limited their use. Command systems broke down under constant pressure. By 1945, the bomber stream faced little opposition. The sky was no longer contested. It was controlled. The bomber offensive did not win the war alone, but it changed its shape. German industry was damaged. Transport collapsed. Air superiority allowed the Allied invasion of Europe to succeed. In total, Allied bombers destroyed thousands of factories, bridges, and rail yards. They forced Germany onto the defensive. Losses were terrible on all sides. An opposing German veteran later said, "When the bombers came, we knew the war was lost, not that day, but someday soon." The sky that once mocked the bombers eventually feared them. When the sky turned black with bombers, it marked the moment air power became impossible to ignore.